Welcome to Future Talk. On today's program, we're going to talk about how to raise your visual IQ. What I mean by that is how to make better use of visual images in your business or other type of organization so you can communicate more effectively, leverage information, and make sure everybody is operating according to the same game plan. I have two guests. David Sibbet is the founder of the Grove Consultants International, which teaches his visual methodology at companies such as Nike and PayPal and agencies such as the Federal Reserve. We're not talking about PowerPoint slides here, but something much more powerful and interactive. David has been doing this type of consulting for over 40 years, and he's written 3 books on the subject: Visual Meetings, Visual Teams, and Visual Leaders. Also with us is our own Mei Lin Fung, co-producer of Future Talk since its beginning. Mei Lin is chairman of the board of the Institute for Service Organization Excellence, where she uses David's methods to do leadership training for her own clients, which include the U.S. Defense Department, Microsoft, and Oklahoma State University. David, let me start with you. It seems sort of obvious that pictures are useful in communication. What's special about your methodology?
I think what's special is applying the methods that engineers and architects have used since the time of Leonardo or maybe even the pharaohs to actual business planning and to helping do organizational change. And it's a way of working that has grown out of Silicon Valley and the Western United States, where there's been so much invention and entrepreneurial activities. So quite a number of these designers and architects began jumping over and facilitating group processes. And I was part of that whole movement in the 70s to basically invent a new kind of facilitation.
So how does it basically work?
Well, I have a picture here. I probably should demonstrate how it works. And I've got a little tablet. This particular drawing is of a visual meeting. This is a very typical planning kind of meeting. And here you have a manager and a facilitator. And the facilitator is basically asking the group what it wants to do, and people talk. And then the facilitator imagines, and listens, and then draws on the chart something. And then people in the meeting actually look at what's in the chart, and you have this interaction that goes on between the picture and what people are saying.
So you're drawing on a big piece of paper in this meeting?
Generally, yeah. And there are a couple of things that happen right away. One is the level of engagement just goes up hugely, almost regardless of your drawing ability. Secondly, you can hold many more items in your mind, so it really is a key to big picture thinking. And some people would say systems thinking. And this third thing is that you can remember it, because if people see it going up there, they as a group are remembering it, and it then goes, into minutes that actually are pictures of what's happened. So these 3 powers have been so strong that it's fueled the development of entire field.
Now, after the picture is finished, does it remain in some kind of archive so people can always go back to it as a reminder of what they discussed?
Well, it happens many different ways. Sometimes it goes into an archive. Sometimes it's worked up into a more polished picture, and I can show some examples of that later. But primarily what it does, if I could move to another slide here, this is a picture of a decision room that has been set up to be visual, and it looks like a regular conference room. But you may notice that up here, and I'll shift to a white pen up here, are a poster that presents a model. You've got templates that are actually like big group worksheets. Plus you've got a PowerPoint here that's got the same pattern on it, and a more finished version over here. So in some ways what you're doing is you're creating what the Greeks actually used years ago, which is a memory theater. The room actually becomes a place that holds the concepts. And so you probably have noticed, if you've ever been in a meeting, that if somebody writes something on a flip chart in one place, and then somebody happens to move the flip chart, people will point to that empty space where the flip chart was. Because what people do is they build actually a very visual image in their minds of what happens.
Now, do you capture the images electronically? Because presumably this will get stored away somewhere, and you want people to be able to access it no matter where they are.
Well, one of the huge developments in my field of visual facilitation has been the digital camera. When it really began to get good, and now it's ubiquitous on every cell phone, anything that's done on a whiteboard or anything that's done on a large sheet of paper in a meeting room now can go right into email, go right into a slide deck, whatever. So I think that's part of what's also fueled its recent growth and popularity.
Now, can you give any examples of specific companies you've worked for and what results were accomplished?
Well, there's a wide range. I've been fascinated with how many different places you could use it. So one example would be, you know, the cookie company that makes the fresh-baked cookies, Otis Spunkmeyer?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're an example of what I would call a mid-market company, which doesn't have a built-up set of staff from the corporate area doing a lot of the generic functions like running meetings and things like that. So they had me come in and start to work with them when they were about a $300,000 company. And over the course of visualizing their vision and then leading their functions through regular business planning in this method, and the rooms often looked exactly like this picture that I showed of the decision room. They are now at about $2.5 billion. They've merged with several other companies in the process, and it was a very effective way of kind of communicating their strategy out from the core group so that the whole system began to understand what they were doing.
Now, do people need special training to do this, or could they just figure it out themselves?
Well, you need to understand the power of visualization. One of the reasons I wrote the Visual Leader book was to help.
Maybe we can get a picture of your book.
Yes.
I think we have a slide of that.
Wiley and Sons got an idea that this actually was a pretty booming field and convinced me to write this series. And the Visual Leader one is for visual managers and leaders who want to use visual practitioners and facilitators and imagery, but aren't necessarily drawers. So an example would be at Nike, I was working with a treasurer of the company who wanted to show how 4 different functions that all fell under treasury actually integrated. So he says, I want to have a vision in 4 days with this group, and I want to involve 60 people. And so myself and another one of my visual practitioners came in, and we met with 60 people the first day. Then we met with a smaller leadership core the second and third day to kind of polish some of the ideas. Then we presented them back to the 60 on the last day in kind of a big theatrical thing. And they had a 4-foot by 24-foot visual depiction of their entire strategy that they'd all agreed on over the course of that time. Now, this is what many people would think of if they were in the design field as rapid prototyping, or where you're basically doing a quick concept of something, getting feedback, and then iterating. Some people call this agile planning, which is really what this kind of methodology supports.
Now, what do you do as a consultant? Are you the guy who comes to the meeting and you do the drawing while you're listening to the meeting, or do you train other people and then your job is done there?
I mostly am a person that goes in and actually does the consulting. And what we are oriented to doing is then working with internal staff so they learn how to do it. And so we have in several large systems like the Mars Corporation, Hewlett-Packard in the 90s, and now we're working at places like Nike. We actually, because they get so excited about this way of working, they say, can you come in and train our people? So then we'll come in and actually train them and then provide tools. But I think what's very interesting about this field is it's in the last 18 years, there's actually been a development of an international association of people who are full-time graphic facilitators.
One thing about doing it on paper is that it seems like it wouldn't be easy to make changes in it, to erase things, or what if the meeting is still going on and you've run out of space?
Well, these new inkjet plotters that will print 3 and 4 feet wide, Canon, HP, a lot of these people make it, you just carry enough paper. And then almost every conference room has flip charts. So If you run out of paper, you put up more paper.
So, Mei Lin, you also apply David's work to your clients.
Yes.
How does that work out for you? What kind of organizations do you work with, and what kind of results do you get?
So I started using visuals, in fact, when I was training Microsoft telesales people in China, because it turned out that these visuals are far more compelling than any words that I could say or put on. So I actually developed a whole series of modules, maybe over 50 modules. At the beginning, they were full of text. And at the end, they were all pictures because they were so much more effective when you actually showed visuals. And that made me aware of the power of the visual language. Today, I'm working with the Department of Defense looking at the future of health. And health is a really contentious area, very complex. We can do so much more, and now we have to decide, what do we do? You could say that we're overwhelmed with words and options. And so what happens when, you know, the Healthcare Affordable Care Act is 1,800 pages long? How does anybody actually comprehend that? What does it mean when you've actually got to roll something out for 300 million people and not get it all tangled up? What we found is that you need to get back to the fundamental concepts that people can understand, what they care about. So in looking at the future of health, we start with looking at what will health be like in 2045. And the amazing thing is that we found so much agreement on what life could be like, the way people would flourish and thrive and be supported in doing that. And then people looked at each other and said, why are we spending all our time today talking about the 3% we disagree with when there's 97% that we agree with in the future? And I'm not sure we could have made that transition without the use of graphics.
So you're saying that visualization helps you conceptualize the issue better in a way that mere words can't. You can all have a common vision of what you're dealing with.
We're really talking about a compass that takes us through where a picture can tell 1,000 words. We are drowning in words today. Mm-hmm. People need to kind of climb out and find their way and see the light. And the light is pictures. What is the picture of health for you, for your family, for your community? And then when they see, oh, that's your picture, my picture looks like that too. And then people start to say, this is worth fighting for, this is worth persevering, instead of saying, that comma should be over there, or let's change this phrase. You know, we need to find our way out of the jungle of words into the clear sunlight of pictures.
Is this a pretty easy sell? Is it pretty easy to convince people that they should make better use of visuals, or maybe some people resist the idea?
There was a lot of resistance at the beginning. Yeah. So, David?
Well, I think leaders know that if you can't imagine it, as you were saying, you're not going to be able to make it. But the question is, how do you get a lot of people to imagine the same thing, and the same picture? I do have an example from the health area that can kind of show you a little bit. This is Sutter Health. And what I like about the picture is you don't need to read the words to kind of see that it basically shows people on the left moving over this bridge to this kind of sunny, visionary area on the right.
Which looks suspiciously like the Golden Gate Bridge.
Well, it does. But the different planks in the bridge and the things that hold it up are all actually explicit elements of their action plan.
Yes.
And all of the elements in the sunrise up there are elements of their vision. And the little graphics then have been worked out. Now, what you need to realize about a picture like this, and the kind of thing that Mei Lin was talking about, is that these are developed over a period of time doing lots of drafts. So this is just the end result. Because once you get the idea that they're going over this river, and the river actually indicates some of the challenges, they can then begin saying, well, we really think this plank or that plank is the important one, and they begin talking across the different functions. In any kind of a hospital kind of setting, you've got kind of a general challenge of the medical group having one way of organizing in a kind of culture, and the administrative group another. I mean, your administrative people are concerned about costs and budgets, and there are huge numbers of metrics now in any kind of healthcare system. The doctors are concerned about saving lives and what's happening with the medicines and that kind of thing. And it's a collegial kind of institution, so trying to change it once it's set up a certain way is very hard. Now, I actually think that the game for leaders and managers is between the ears, because if people don't have a mental model of the world that accounts for what they need to do, they don't pay attention to it. You have to have a way of thinking that leads you to care. Like in the 50s, most managers had no idea that their companies were producing pollutants. It wasn't until Rachel Carson came along.
Plumes of pollutants.
Pollutants. They didn't know.
Yeah.
They actually did not know.
Yeah.
And now, one of the things that's so challenging, for instance, in trying to visualize, and this is some of the stuff I'm working on with the higher tech companies, is how do you visualize actually being connected with your customers in a networked way where you can actually crowdsource solutions and be innovative?
Yeah.
This is so dynamic and fluid. If you think about an organization in the old way of being kind of here we are and we're in a corporation with our boundaries, and then there's the world, it's hard to imagine what these newer companies are actually doing.
Does this help flatten the hierarchy a little bit also? Because in many companies, the people on the bottom have no idea what the people on top are doing, and the people on the top don't really know what the people on the bottom are doing.
I think I have a good example of that, where we were working with basically people at the top, leadership, and we created some of this bridge-type metaphor about where the leaders wanted to see it go, with this thriving and flourishing and patient-centered and caring about employees. So the leaders spent half a day doing that, and we put the murals up on the wall. And then we brought the operational people, and we took them through to show them what their leaders had done. And they said, we had no idea they even cared about this stuff. All we hear from them is, where's yesterday's report? And for them to see the big heart and the leadership and caring and compassion, and to see those words and those pictures, it changed the entire tone. It engaged people. It was no longer not another boring meeting where I'm showing PowerPoint slides with 10,000 metrics. It was, my leadership wants to know how we care about our patients. And it has transformed care by just having that picture done by the senior leadership, seen by the operational people. And then they went on, inspired by that, to create their own picture, which some of the power of this is the engagement of people's hearts and minds. So I'll say that incident happened in November 2011. But in 2012, later on, we went into one of the groups and they brought back all those pictures and they went through it again. They said, okay, this is how we change and here's how we're going to go on. So you've got, instead of read this 100-page report, find out what, we walked around from mural to mural and people said, oh yeah, those problems are still there, but we've made progress over here.
This might be great for contract law where you have all this fine print that you don't find out what it means until it's too late.
A good example of an image was a healthcare system in Minnesota was working on their quality vision. And this is one that I describe in some detail in the book in a case study where I go through all the steps that you go through to develop one of these. But one of the dilemmas they had in their vision was they knew they wanted to have total quality, but there is a big move toward evidence-based medicine now, which is very concrete, lots of metrics and that kind of thing. By the same token, this is a hospital system formed out of 5 different religious-based hospitals. And we're really into nursing and the caring and the service that comes from personal relationships. And so you could see these as contradictory a little bit, you know, concrete, evidence-based medicine, until we came up with the image of the spirit of nursing as this blue image of a nurse whose hands were caring and service and feet were on evidence-based medicine, surrounded by the 5 principles of quality. And one of the things that visuals do that text doesn't, text is very strong for narration, for story, which tends to go in a linear sequence towards some goal. Text actually can juxtapose really contradictory things on the same image. and you don't have the same sense that you can't have both of them. So you can resolve a lot of puzzles that people have in their mind if they only think about things in text and numbers by actually embedding these in the correct kind of metaphor or image in graphics.
Now, does it take some special skill to be able to create the graphics? It would seem you need a bit of art talent at least.
Not a lot, but let me go to a blank sheet here and just show you how easy this is. I mean, and anybody in this program can kind of draw right along with this. So, for instance, if you're, let's just say that you're a manager and you have a flip chart in your table and you've got some people here and maybe you have somebody on the phone and whatever, and you're now at the point of the meeting where you want to have people make commitments. So if that manager stands up at the chart and actually is the one that writes down people's commitments, do you think these people here are going to think that that person heard them and remembered them and cared about them? Yes, you would. Now, if that person stands up and is able to draw a little human being, which is very simple, you just draw a circle, and then you throw a little hand out, and then you throw a little foot out, and then another foot out, and then another hand out. That is a pretty good little person. You add a couple of shadows, a little bit of consciousness. These kinds of drawings are something that anybody can do. They're little simple icons. So one of the things that some of the more effective leaders do is they don't get up and record whole meetings. That's what visual practitioners do. But they will, say, get up and explain some simple concept that's a key to their strategy. Like they might draw an S-curve and show the stages of and explain why they're moving from an entrepreneurial phase to a takeoff phase. You know, if I shifted to the next thing here, I mean, this is, most leaders who run companies would have this model in their mind about the way organizations grow and know that there are differences between these three stages. That in this stage, it's entrepreneurial and anything goes. In this stage, it's the growth stage, and you better get people on the bus or not on the bus. So this jumping from this culture to that culture in the S-curve is actually challenging. And this is the mature organization. And what you want to try to do is to extend its life. So a leader will often want to get up and do a little sketch, just like I did here, and explain to their team they're moving from this to that. Well, there are dozens of these concepts, which you now see PowerPoint is used rather universally. But what happens is that when this kind of thing is put into a PowerPoint and then you push a bunch of slides at people, they don't have the same kind of engagement. If you see somebody pick up a marker and draw.
So this is drawn in real time as opposed to PowerPoint, which is prepared before the meeting.
So I think for a leader, the main use of visualization is to explain a key concept that can be done in kind of simple sketches. But better yet, encourage other people to do drawings and things. So many of the most effective engagement processes are ones where you have small groups actually manifest. So, for instance, one of the ways that we do visioning, if you're trying to imagine future possibilities, is you get a number of small groups imagining that they have totally succeeded and they're now on the cover of an important magazine. And so you have them design the cover of the magazine, decide what the big headlines are, decide what the images are, actually imagine reading it, and when 4 or 5 small groups come back together and each tell the story, you can see right away across the 5 groups what themes are popping out for everybody.
And I think it's fair to say that the human mind in general tends to deal more in pictures than in words. Like when you dream at night, you're not seeing a stream of text going by.
No. Well, they say that something like 70 or 80% of our brain is actually processing visual imagery.
Now, there's some kinds of organizations which are more amenable to this approach than others. Is this better tailored for some types of groups than others?
I think ones that are having to deal with change.
Yes.
So if you say you're in a pretty static organization, you're not having to deal with a lot of new stuff. You can just focus in on small things. Words are pretty effective for that. It's when you're trying to to look at new concepts or new areas that you're trying to explore, pictures are very helpful to get what's in one person's mind out quickly. Because if you say, okay, tell us about it, and then go write a 5-page briefing paper, by the time it comes back, nobody understands it, and least of all the person who wrote the paper. But if you just say, okay, let's just all sit down together and tell us what you see. And either draw it, have that person draw it, or have somebody else draw it, and then they can say, well, it wasn't quite like that, move that over here. Suddenly, everyone's engaged, hearts and minds are engaged, and that's really what we're looking for here today. So many people in the workplace are disengaged with their work. They're just battered by these PowerPoint slides, these piles of reports, and it's like, where are the people? The human being has become an interruption to the work. It's kind of weird. Yeah. Aren't we the purpose for the work? What pictures do is put us back in the center and our engagement with each other as the main purpose of why we live.
There are types of organizations which don't exercise as much. For instance, if you're dealing with numbers principally, you may be more used to looking at spreadsheets and things like that. But if you're in a firm that's designing products and stuff, you might be more used to graphics. But there are areas where what Mei Lin is talking about are absolutely essential. For instance, one of the common things almost any organization needs to deal with, nonprofits included, is listening to their customers and their constituents. And so one of the applications for visual facilitation is actually running sessions where you listen to the customer and then feed back the voice of the customer.
David, I'm afraid we're going to have to stop it there because I've just gotten the signal we're out of time. So I'd like to thank my two guests, David Sibbet of the Grove Consultants International, Mei Lin Fung of the Institute for Service Organization Excellence, talking about raising your visual IQ. Thank you for watching. Visit us next time. Visit our website, www.futuretalk.net. For Future Talk, I'm Marty Wasserman. Good night.